This video is sponsored by ToneGym. The circle of fifths is like the master tool of music theory. On the surface, it's literally just the 12 notes of Western music arranged in ascending fifths, which alone is pretty neat. It's cool that our 12 notes can wrap neatly around a circle like this. But beyond this simple diagram is a tool that can help us conceptualize and understand so much about music theory. So today I want to go through 4 progressively more advanced uses of the circle of fifths, starting with key signatures. The circle of fifths is often introduced to students as a tool for working out key signatures. The key signature is the collection of sharps or flats that are placed at the start of a piece of music to let us know which major scale the piece will be based on. In other words, it's key. Generally speaking, when we look at a piece of sheet music, we can work out what key it's in at a glance by looking at the key signature. But of course, to understand which key signature corresponds to which key, we have to memorize it. So if we've not memorized it yet, we can use our circle of fifths to work it out. All we have to do is count the number of sharps that we have, so in this example 3, and then much like a clock, we count that many steps around the circle of fifths. So we start at the top with C, which has no sharps or flats, and then we count around 1 sharp, 2 sharps, 3 sharps. So it's the key of A major, which has 3 sharps. Now, a piece of music with this key signature might not necessarily be in the key of A major. It might be, for example, instead in the relative minor, which is F sharp minor. But the thing is, F sharp minor and A major use the exact same set of 7 notes, with the same 3 sharps. Working out whether the key of the piece is A major or F sharp minor comes down to the context of the music itself, but the important thing is we know which 7 notes we should be using to perform this piece of music. So let's now put that to the test. We have this key signature now, which has 4 flats on it. So we go back to our circle of fifths, and because it's flats not sharps, this time we count the other way around the circle, anti-clockwise, rather than clockwise. Clockwise is for sharps, anti-clockwise is for flats. So starting at C, which has 0 flats and 0 sharps, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's the key of A flat major that has 4 flats. And in fact, the circle of fifths can also tell us which 4 flats those should be. Starting from this point, rather than at the top of C, we can see which flats and in which order we need to add to our key signature to get the key. B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat. That also works for sharps. If we wanted to work out which 3 sharps are meant to be in an A major key signature, we count round from this point. We have F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. Those are the 3 sharps of our A major key signature in the correct order on which they should be placed on the key signature. So that's the sort of primary use of the circle of fifths, a way of working out how to read and understand key signatures, understanding which sharps and flats are in which keys and which major scales. And although that's perhaps the main use of the circle of fifths, it's certainly not the only use. The circle of fifths really shows to us how many different facets of harmony are related to each other. Another way we could use the circle of fifths is to understand and visualize how closely related 2 different keys are. Modulating to a closely related key will result in a very smooth key change, one so smooth that it will often sound like we've not actually changed key at all. For example, in I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles, the song modulates from the key of G major to the key of C major. Although we can hear that something's happened in the harmony here, it doesn't sound like a bold, stark key change. It's far more subtle because the 2 keys, G and C, are closely related. They share all but 1 note, and we can see that on the circle of fifths. G and C are next to each other because they're closely related. The only difference between them is whether they're using an F natural or an F sharp. If it's F natural, then we're in C major, and if it's an F sharp, then we're in G major. So we can really easily change the key from one to the other by just changing which version of F that we're using. And this can be a really valuable thing to understand if you're trying to compose your own modulation. With each degree out from a key center that we move on the circle of fifths, we're getting 1 step further away in relation to that key. Moving from keys that are adjacent to each other will result in a really smooth modulation. And vice versa, the further we jump around the circle of fifths, the more stark and disconnected that modulation will sound, because those two keys are now unrelated. They don't share many notes in common. For example, the bridge of Summer of '69 by Bryan Adams modulates from the key of D major to the key of F major. And as we can see from the circle of fifths, these two keys are not very closely related. Therefore, this key change will sound quite bold and disconnected.
Back in the summer of '69, man, we were killing time. We were young and reckless. We needed to unwind. I guess another.
But the fact that the two keys here in our modulation are unrelated is a good thing here. It means that this key change for the bridge injects loads of energy and grabs our attention because it sticks out from the rest of the music. Understanding how closely or unclosely related two key centers are can help you choose the perfect level of modulation when you're composing or arranging your song. And the circle of fifths provides a perfect tool for visualizing this. ToneGym is an ear training tool that musicians can use to improve their perception of intervals. ToneGym basically makes ear training into a game. For example, their Departurers game will play you an interval and then you have to guess which interval it is. When you get the answer right, you'll progress to new levels with more and more challenging intervals. Or if you want to improve your perception of rhythm, then you can play their Rhythmic Parrot game, where you'll be played a rhythm and you have to play it back as accurately as possible. Improving your ear will do wonders for your musicianship, and ToneGym is an easy and fun way to do that. Use the link in the description to find out more about ToneGym. So that's our second use of the circle of fifths, conceptualizing how closely related two keys are in a modulation. But we can also do a similar thing when thinking about different chords in a chord progression and how closely related those chords are to each other. As I discussed before in my circle of fifths chord progression video, when two chords are related by the interval of a fifth, it means that they're going to work really well together. Therefore, if a chord progression moves around the circle of fifths, either clockwise or anti-clockwise, it will result in a smooth, satisfying motion. For example, this chord progression from Hey Joe features a string of major chords, all a fifth away from each other.
Hey Joe, I heard you shot Joe, let it down, shot it down to the ground.
So even though these chords don't actually belong in the same key together, they still sound super satisfying because they are each taking one step around the circle of fifths. So if a chord progression moves by step around the circle of fifths, it's going to sound really cohesive and smooth. And the opposite is also true. If a chord progression jumps around the circle of fifths, jumps across it, it's going to result in quite a jarring, disconnected chord change. For example, in the intro of Subterranean Homesick Alien by Radiohead, we get a move from D minor to A flat, which is the opposite side of the circle, a tritone away, and then back now to D major. D and A flat are a tritone apart, the furthest we can get around the circle before we start coming back on ourselves. So this results in a really acrobatic, unnatural sounding chord change. This doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad chord change, of course. It actually works really well here to cast a sort of uncanny mood into a song that's about alien abduction. The point is that once again, the circle of fifths provides this brilliant visual aid to understand how the chords in a given progression are actually related to each other. So far we've looked at how the circle of fifths can be used to understand key signatures, to see how closely related two different key centers are, and to see how closely related two different chords in a chord progression are. But a fourth use of the circle of fifths is to compare the relative brightness of different modes. As I discussed before in this video, the 7 modes of the major scale, Lydian, Mixolydian, Dorian, etc., when ordered like this, can offer us 7 levels of tonal brightness. For example, moving from the minor scale to the Phrygian scale introduces one more degree of darkness to our tonal sound, to the sound of the harmony. Or moving from the major scale to Lydian makes everything sound that bit brighter. With each step we take through these 7 modes, we are either gaining or losing one flat. For example, all we have to do to move from C major to C Mixolydian is flatten the B. Or to move from C Phrygian to C Locrian, we once again add one more flat, this time flattening the G. So how is this related to the circle of fifths? Well, it's the circle of fifths which can show us which note we need to flatten or sharpen to take that next step along this spectrum. At the top of the circle, we have the key of C major. If we want to make this scale 1 degree brighter, all we have to do is take one step to the right around the circle and add the sharp that belongs to this key. The one sharp of G major is F sharp. So we add that F sharp to our C major scale, thereby removing our usual F natural, and we wind up with C Lydian, the scale that is one step brighter than C major. And of course we can go the other way. If we're starting with C major again and we want to make it 1 degree darker, we now add the flat of the key to the left. The key to the left is F major, and the one flat of F major is B flat. So a C major scale with a B flat rather than a usual B is C mixed Lydian, the scale 1 degree darker than C major. If we wanted to go 4 degrees darker than C major, well, that winds us up here. The key of A flat has 4 flats, B flat, E flat, A flat and D flat. So we swap them into our C major scale, giving us a C Phrygian scale, the scale which is 4 degrees darker than C major. Each step of the circle represents a different level of tonal brightness. The reason the circle of fifths is so important is because the relationship of the fifth is so important. Beyond the octave, the fifth is the simplest and most consonant interval we have. All the interval of a fifth really is the ratio of 3 to 2. If two frequencies resonate in that ratio, then they can combine in this very satisfying harmonic way, reinforcing each other and creating an aural sensation that humans just love to hear. This super cohesive relationship of the fifth is ultimately the core of why harmony and melody sounds consonant to our ears, why it sounds so pleasing, because the different frequencies are just interlocking in this satisfying way. Understanding the circle of fifths can be a eureka moment for musicians. Everything you knew about harmony, whether it was stuff you'd been taught in a classroom or stuff you'd learnt innately by just playing your instrument, suddenly can make so much visual and logical sense when laid out in this simple diagram. Anytime you want a better understanding of what's happening in harmony, the circle of fifths is your weapon of choice.